that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I wonder hope gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Energy Week with George Harvey and Tom Fennell, the famous Tom Fennell. I'll let you guess who I am. And every day I go to the internet, find whatever I can about news as relates to energy and climate change. And I put it at my blog, which is geoharvey.wordpress.com. And then once a week we get together and talk about the best of the blog, as Tom says.
Bingo.
I got your words right before you were able to say them.
I didn't copyright them. Next time I'll be more careful.
Aha, there you go. All right, so we're going to start with Thursday, August 6th. And this is an item that comes from an organization called Click Green. Planning consent has been given for the construction of the next stage of the giant Dogger Bank offshore wind farm in the North Sea, the biggest offshore wind project in the world. Dogger Bank T-side A and B will boast up to 400 wind turbines and have an installed capacity of 2.4 gigawatts, enough to power the annual electricity needs of 2 million British homes.
This is going to be a very large project.
Yeah. And you know these offshore projects, the capacity factor for those wind turbines is approaching 60%.
The wind's always blowing up.
Yeah, right. And their wind turbines are getting better and better at being efficient. And so
they get bigger, and as they get bigger, they get more wind. I mean,
that's right. The taller you go, the more likely you are to run into the jet stream. And so 2.4 gigawatts is the equivalent of a couple of smallish nuclear power plants.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, what is the picture? Is that just an offshore wind turbine?
That's just an offshore wind turbine.
Oh, okay.
We've seen enough of them. I didn't put up a real big one because I think by now everybody knows what they look like.
Yeah, I suppose it's true.
I'm trying to get this cursor around so I can bring you back up.
Well, don't curse too loudly. A recent poll of Republican presidential primary voters in early voting states of New Hampshire and South Carolina finds an unexpected result for the 17 candidates campaigning there. Most of those likely to vote in the Republican primaries in each of these states support regulating carbon pollution and even support using President Obama's clean energy plan.
I got
You're still fishing around.
I'm still fishing around.
Okay.
I definitely am here.
Well, I saw the numbers on this, by the way, and 60% of them wanted to regulate carbon pollution, and just a tiny bit more than 50%.
This one's on this one.
You having fun talking on
There
television?
we go.
This one's on this one. Ah, here we go.
Got it now.
Got it.
There's George Bush talking to the people in
Jeb Bush.
Jeb Bush. Yeah,
Jeb Bush.
Jeb, sorry about that. He's in Derry, New Hampshire, in the town hall, the Opera House.
In the Opera House.
Yeah.
Derry has an opera house. That's pretty amazing when you think about opera in Derry. I read a story once about a tiny town in northern Maine that had an opera company that went on tour in Poland.
Sounds interesting.
Doesn't it?
Yes.
I wouldn't say that they were the best operatic singers I've ever heard, but then, of course, I haven't heard much opera. Okay, that was in Think Progress.
There's a quick takeaway here.
Okay.
In New Hampshire, half of likely Republican Party voters said they favored the EPA's proposal to set strict carbon dioxide limits on existing coal-fired power plants.
Isn't that amazing?
It is, really.
It is, kind of.
I think it's New Hampshire.
Yeah,
you know?
That's right. Okay, from Huffington Post, we've got this. Don't believe the naysayers who claim the federal Clean Power Plan is bad for business. Because when you talk to business people creating jobs, fostering innovation, and driving economic growth all across America, they're likely to say the opposite in poll after poll after poll. Small business owners, executives, and others express widespread support for the Clean Power Plan.
Yeah, there's a couple of graphs up there that illustrate this.
Okay.
We also got something sticking up here in the corner that I don't know what it is.
Oh. That looks like it's going to be there, too.
It's got a little X on it. If I can find the X, I'm going to X on it and see if it went
There
away.
you go.
I got rid of
Wow. We may not know much about anything else, but we know how to get rid of things on computers we don't want.
Okay, move along to the next one here.
Sydney Morning Herald. Wait a minute. That says Sydney Morning Herald
U.S.
Post.
fossil fuel lobby outspent green groups. That's what I got next.
Oh, well, I've got a thing that says, oh, yes, you're right.
Bingo.
There you go. Clean Technica, Friday, August 7th. The United States installed a record of
That's not it either.
Oh?
This is Sydney Morning Herald Post.
Electric utilities, oil companies, and their
Yeah,
allies.
you got it.
Aha. Spent $502 million on lobbying in the year since the Environmental Protection Agency proposed new regulations on carbon emissions from power plants, according to disclosures reviewed by Bloomberg. That's 22 times more than the renewable companies and environmentalists spent. But many other businesses support the plan. And it's going to be interesting to see how this unfolds, because there are a lot of companies with a lot of money that support that plan. And my bet is, by the time we get to the final yards of the presidential election and the congressional election, we're going to be seeing some big companies that we have not seen so far spending big money on supporting candidates who support this
They're
plan.
spending big money already, and the race hasn't even started.
Yeah, well, this was $502 million spent already by oil companies and coal companies and electric utilities. But I have a feeling that we're going to be seeing banks and insurance companies and a variety of other companies weighing in on the other side. Okay, now we're finally back to Friday, August 7th, Clean Technica, which I was trying to slip in before. The United States installed a record of 845 wind turbines totaling 1,661 megawatts in the second quarter of 2015. That's just the second quarter, 3 months. The turbines were spread across 12 separate projects in 5 different states. However, it was the state of Texas that blew the competition away in the second quarter, installing a total of 1,226 megawatts. This brings Texas' total installed capacity up to over 15,000 megawatts.
It's interesting.
A lot of power.
Texas has the oil, they got the wind.
Yeah, don't you know it? You know, I've spent a little time looking at the Roscoe wind farm from Roscoe, Texas.
Okay.
From the satellite pictures. And
how'd you get up there?
It's hard to hold on to those things, but especially when you're shaped the way I am. But nevertheless, from the satellites, you can see the wind turbines. There's 680.
You can see them from the satellite.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, make out what they are.
Yeah, I think there's 683 or 684 of them, something like that. And there's also a bunch of oil pumps. And those oil pumps very clearly are mostly derelict, and some of them have got oil spills next to them, the patches of black.
So they've used up the oil, but they got the wind now.
They got the wind, that's right, and they seem to like it. Okay, our next item is from Echo Watch. Demand for Tesla's energy revolutionary battery has been crazy, according to the company's founder and CEO, Elon Musk. He said there have been more than 100,000 reservations worth $1 billion for the batteries, which have sold out through 2016. Musk said, quote, "You can basically, in principle, shut down half the world's power plants if you had stationary storage."
Well, he's working on stationary storage.
That's what he's doing.
He's not alone.
No, he's not. There's a lot of...
He's got a very good product, and evidence of that is it's sold out for the rest of the year.
Yeah, the only problem is I shouldn't say nobody. There have been people who have tested these. They're well tested, but they don't have a lot of real world activity yet that people can report. So our next item, that was from EchoWatch. Our next item is from Hydro World, which sounds a little bit like it is the name of a movie or something.
Yeah. Science fiction.
Science fiction.
Yeah.
A letter signed by 16 states opposes the EPA's recently unveiled Clean Power Plan, requesting an immediate stay on a program the opposition says is, quote, unlawfully exploits Section 111D of the Clean Air Act, end quote. The Clean Power Plan is opposed by states whose economies are heavily reliant on coal, which fear that conversions to cleaner sources might increase energy sales. This again from Hydro World.
I don't think that's what's going to happen.
No, as a matter of fact, I did an article on this for Green Energy Times, and did some research into the background of it. And I'll tell you what it is if you want to know.
Why not?
I will tell you even if you don't want to know. In 2003, the EPA released a study that had done, a determination they called it, that said that they did not have the authority to regulate carbon dioxide. They did not. Mm-hmm. And the state of Massachusetts and a number of other states, I think there were a dozen of them, and a bunch of cities and a bunch of nonprofit organizations all weighed in on this in a lawsuit called Massachusetts versus the Environmental Protection Agency. And in 2007, that got to the Supreme Court. Mm-hmm. And it got there through a district court that basically told them that they had to regulate carbon dioxide. Or they did have the authority to regulate carbon dioxide. So the EPA appealed to the Supreme Court from the Washington District Court, and the Supreme Court said, you have the authority to regulate carbon dioxide emissions, and sent the whole thing back to the District Court, which said, yes, and you must, because carbon dioxide emissions are dangerous to human beings.
That was an interesting
Yeah, it was an interesting thing. And they did take climate change into consideration. So the next thing that happened was they came up with a plan in 2010, which resulted in a lawsuit from utilities who wanted the plan not to be put in force. So that went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court basically said, okay, you can't regulate all carbon emissions, only those carbon emissions from plants that produce more than 250 tons of pollution every year, which means virtually every large utility fossil fuel burning installation.
Okay, so
can't regulate your car.
And most of the plants are bigger than that
yeah,
number.
Can't regulate your car. Mm-hmm. Most, but not all, schools don't fall into, perhaps, I might be wrong about that, but 250 tons of pollution is not all that much pollution.
It's hard for me to wrap my mind around tons of pollution.
Okay, let's think.
Sounds like a lot.
Yeah, it does. Let's think about it this way.
But after all, we're talking weighing gases here, aren't we?
Yeah, we might be. 250 tons is 500,000 pounds. Now, 500,000 pounds represents the emissions, because gasoline is 20 pounds per gallon. Okay.
Okay.
Of
good benchmark.
It's a good benchmark. 25,000 gallons of gasoline. Mm-hmm. If you're driving in a car that only gets 10 miles per gallon and you go 250,000 miles in a year, that's how much gasoline you've burned.
It's also a lot of driving.
It's a lot of driving. It's a horrible car. Ditch it. Get rid of your job. Do something worth doing. Okay. But it does mean that, you don't have to have a big power plant to reach that kind of level. And a school, for example,
a large school,
absolutely, no problem. Hospital, no problem.
Certainly an industrial plant.
But what they said was, we're going to regulate the industrial plants. The utilities went after them. The utilities lost. The EPA now has to regulate carbon dioxide, but can't do it from small producers. They have to do it from, guess who? The utilities who sued. So
is that poetic justice?
Is it? So what happens then? That issue, that decision came on the in 2014, whereupon the EPA, which had been constrained to do so by the Supreme Court and the District Court, produced a bunch of regulations on carbon emissions. How these guys are planning on fighting that, I have no idea.
But they got big bucks behind them.
They got big bucks, but there's no way that they're going to prevail on the idea that this is unconstitutional or unlawful, because it is a response to a court order.
Yeah.
So, and that court order came from the district court, federal district court, and the Supreme Court. It's going to be very difficult to deal with because it means that they're going to have to go back to the Supreme Court and convince them that they're wrong a year after they made up their minds. I don't think that's going to happen.
I don't think so either.
So anyway.
There's one thing we're not even mentioning.
Yeah?
No matter what happens, eventually we will run out of these resources.
Absolutely.
No matter what they do.
Yeah.
If they went full steam ahead, we'd still run out of them.
Yeah, that's.
What do we do then? Well, by then, hopefully, the renewables will have taken
the
over.
renewables will have taken over before
That's
that.
what they call renewables.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, Saturday, August 8th from KUAR, Entergy Arkansas.
I know them.
Proposed what it called, quote, a more reasonable, end quote, approach to a deal with regional haze in Arkansas in response to the EPA's rejection of the state's earlier plan to improve visibility in wilderness areas. Entergy would shut down its coal-burning operations in White Bluff Electric Station instead of spending over $2 billion on scrubbers.
Well, I can't say I blame them.
Wow. That's a lot of money.
That's a picture of the installation.
You know, I built a scrubber once.
Did you really?
I did indeed. It only took me 2 days. Just think about that. That's $1 billion a day.
Scrubbing your back or what?
Huh?
What was it, scrubbing your back or what?
No, I used to work in chemical plants, and one of the things that I had to do was I did a lot of the engineering and maintenance work and so forth. I wasn't an engineer at the time, but they had a process that produced chlorine gas. And you don't want to release chlorine gas into the atmosphere. It's kind of nasty, yeah.
It's not household bleach.
No, it's not household bleach. And so the way that you deal with this is you suck the gas into a tall stack. Well, it's not that tall. It was only about 15 feet.
All right.
And it was made out of ceramic pipe, and it was full of little plastic things that looked like springs. And you had the bottom of this thing standing in a tank full of sodium hydroxide, lye basically, caustic soda, and you pump that up to the top and it spills down through all those little spring things, and as the gas comes in, you've got chlorine gas hitting on stuff which is full of sodium hydroxide. So the two of them react. That's a very powerful reaction, and they make sodium chloride, which is table salt.
Yeah.
They also make other things, but ultimately it's that and sodium hypochlorite, which basically eats the pumps up. but nevertheless, it worked. I wasn't the guy who specified the pumps. I'm just the guy who put the tower together.
A little takeaway from this, in case you're wondering. The EPA is operating under a special rule here, where they're trying to protect national parks.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so they call it the regional haze rule.
Yes.
And if you're within such and such a proximity of a national park,
right,
you've got to be pretty clean.
Yes, you do. That's right. And the idea of spending $2 billion on scrubbers is really kind of astonishing, but it speaks to the costs that the coal industry has got in front of it.
Well, they've been getting away with murder for so long.
Yes, they have been. They have been dumping their trash in our backyards.
Absolutely.
So anyway, should we go on?
Yeah, we might as well.
Clean Technica says Mary Nichols, the chair of the California Air Resources Board, says she hopes to implement new laws in the state that would eventually prohibit the sale of new cars that are equipped with internal combustion engines.
Now that's interesting.
It sure
that's
is.
Interesting.
The
Mary up there.
Yeah, there you go. Zero emissions vehicle program California now has in place requires that 2.7% of new cars purchased in the state in 2017 be free of greenhouse gas emissions. You know, what struck me when I read that article was, once that gets in place, how are people who have got internal combustion engines going to get gasoline? Because the gas stations are going to start shutting down, and they're going to shut down fairly rapidly. And at some point, you know, when 10% of the cars are are running on gasoline, how many gas
It's
stations are
gonna
going to be
hard
open?
to get gas,
Yeah.
So it's going to kind of accelerate the whole process.
I saw a vehicle that was for sale a number of years ago, and it had a special engine, and it required 106 octane leaded gasoline to run this thing. You don't want to run it on stuff out of the pump because it'll die and it'll literally come apart. And so I said to a person, "How do you get such a thing?" And he said, "Well, could at that time. I don't know that you can anymore, but he said you can buy the lead additive and add it in yourself." And I said, "Okay, so what do you do about 106 octane gasoline?" Mm-hmm. He said, "Easy. You go to the nearest airport."
Oh, yeah?
Well, okay, that kind of puts a crimp in you driving down the road and saying, "No, I think it's time to pull into a gas station."
What kind of car was this?
It was a ferret.
A what?
A ferret?
A ferret.
A ferret.
I don't never even heard of that one.
Yeah, well, it's an armored car.
Oh.
And it has it has 15 forward and 15 reverse gears, and the engine is built by was built by Jaguar.
I'll be darned.
And when the thing runs, it sounds like a Jaguar. And it weighs 6 tons, and it has
Everybody should have one.
bulletproof wheels.
Everybody should have
And it also came complete with boxes full of Sten gun magazines, although it didn't have a Sten gun with it. Believe it or not, you can buy such things in the United States, but they don't have guns. Anyway, I think we should go on from that. We've hit a new low. Wicked local Brookline
Here we go.
told us that adding a new hydropower bill that he already laid before the legislature, Massachusetts Governor Charlie Baker has filed a bill to accelerate solar power industry growth in Massachusetts and then adjust incentives. The administration says its bill will help the state meet, quote, well ahead of schedule, end quote, its goal of 1,600 megawatts of solar power by 2020 while lowering costs.
I think Massachusetts is on track for that, isn't it?
It seems to be.
They seem to be.
Yeah. Although there are people who say that Charlie Baker's not aggressive enough.
Huh.
Okay. And then we have this from VT Digger. One of Vermont's most prominent renewable energy developers is proposing to build more wind power in the region of Vermont, in a region of Vermont that has been divided over such projects for years. David Blittersdorf wants to erect 2 wind turbines in the Northeast Kingdom ridgeline in a 1,100-person town of Irisburg and produce enough electricity to power more than 2,000 homes.
We're talking 5 megawatts.
5 megawatts.
That's a bit.
Yeah, it's a bit, but it's only 2 turbines.
But they're big turbines.
Well, 2.5 megawatts.
Yeah, yeah.
I'd like to have one of those. Just think of the money I'd make.
But there's opposition to this.
There is opposition. There's a lot of opposition in the Northeast Kingdom. The people in the Northeast Kingdom say, we know all about wind turbines. We know people who live near them. Or we know people who live near them.
The article mentions your friend Annette Smith.
Uh-huh.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Well, if you don't mind, I'm going to go on to something else.
I think so. I was going
Okay.
to quote Bittersdorf, but I'll let him defend himself.
Okay. Sunday, August 9th, from Imperial Valley News, which of course is in California, Agricultural Secretary Tom Vilsack announced $63 million in loans and grants for 264 renewable energy and energy efficiency projects nationwide that USDA is supporting through its Rural Energy for America program. These REAP projects are expected to generate and or save 207.8 million kilowatt hours of energy, enough to provide power demands for more than 13,600 homes every year.
And the takeaway here, it includes solar and wind, as we would expect.
Yep.
Renewable biomass, including anaerobic digesters.
Right.
Okay, small hydro.
Yep.
Ocean energy, which is totally unlooked at right now. I mean,
Yeah.
that's going to be a biggie, I think.
I think it has the potential of being there. Really
Hydrogen and geothermal. So
That's-
it's
you
almost
gotta-
everything but fossil fuels.
big. You're allowed a wide range of sources out of this.
And it's rural.
And it's rural.
You're not gonna
However, I want to
qualify-
point out
Yeah.
to anybody who wants to know, if you want to get involved in a REAP program and you live in Brattleboro,
Yeah.
you're rural.
You're rural.
Brattleboro is
It's
rural.
Yep.
Okay? Anything in Windham County is rural.
It's rural. Anything
And-
in almost all of Vermont.
Well, and the fact of the matter is that people who live in other parts of the United States, if they want to get involved in this, really should look to find out, unless they live in an inner city, and even if they do live in an inner city, you never can tell what's going to go on with these programs. They might have a thing that says, if you live within half a mile of a beekeeper, you know, whatever it is, you're rural. And all you got to do is say, well, that guy down the street. I remember when at one point reading that there was somebody who lived on Fifth Avenue who had a colony of bees that he kept. And they went
Oh,
up.
yeah?
They
And
went
they
up.
made them rural, huh?
No, but you never can tell how the rules come down.
Well, I remember when I was pretty young, there was a family in Brooklyn
Yep.
that had a farm.
Yes.
Right in the middle of downtown Brooklyn.
In
you know,
Brooklyn.
They had a couple of cows.
Yeah. Well,
and they were getting rural benefits.
rural benefits, yes. And as a matter of fact, I would bet that there are still farms in New York City, on Staten Island.
Well, when I was a kid, there were farms in the Bronx.
Yeah, there were. I remember farms in the Bronx. I don't remember any in Brooklyn, but I do remember.
Well, it's just, nobody even knew it was there, I don't
Yeah.
think. You know, it was there
But
back
I remember reading that there were a number in the Bronx, and then the article went on and said, and there are 200 and some odd in Staten Island. And Staten Island is not that built up that all those farms are
No, Staten
dissipated.
Island itself is pretty rural.
Yeah.
Most of it is.
Yeah. And the very southernmost tip of Staten Island, about 3 blocks, the very southernmost tip, is the only part of New York that is more than 50 miles from the Indian Point nuclear power plant. And 50
that's
miles
interesting.
is 50 miles is the line that they used for
evacuation
Americans.
goal.
Yeah, they wanted the United States wanted
Evacuation
all Americans more than 50 miles away from that plant at Fukushima. So, you know, if you had a similar evacuation for Indian Point, it would include almost 100% of New York City, and of course a lot of other places too. Okay, here we go. We're back in biz here. Monday, August 10th, Capital FM Kenya. I don't know why people at Kenya reported this, but it's interesting that they did. Anaerobic digesters capture both the smell and the greenhouse gases of manure, providing fuel in the process. The EPA estimates that more than 3 million tons of greenhouse gas emissions were eliminated last year by 247 U.S. livestock farms with biogas recovery systems, of which 16 are in Vermont.
Cow power.
Cow power. There are
I'm
about...
looking at the picture of the cows. First of all, we've seen this picture before. The second thing
Yeah.
is, all the cows are looking at the camera. They know
Except
what's
for
going
one.
on.
If you look halfway down there, you'll see one of them is
One of
kind
them's
of...
eating.
Yeah, one of them's eating. There are about 8,000 farms in the U.S. Big enough to make biogas recovery system viable, according to the USDA. That is interesting.
For most
This-
farms, manure is a pungent problem.
Yeah.
At Homestead Dairy, it smells like money.
Well, this means that we've got an energy resource here, and it's also a resource for cleaning things up that is only about 3% utilized.
Yeah, it's there.
And-
it's going to happen.
Yeah, it's
And what did we see last week, 2 weeks ago? A guy had a small biogas digester.
I've seen these things for sale that are designed for household waste.
That's coming too.
They're right there. You can get a kit to make one yourself for $500, and I don't know where it is, but if you go on one of the search engines online,
you
you
find it.
find them. That's
Yep.
how I did. And anyway, Okay, the next one is from VT Digger.
And the next one is closer to home.
Yes, it is. A deal that paves the way to build what will eventually be one of the largest solar arrays in the state of Vermont was finalized by the Wyndham Solid Waste Management District and developer Pristine Farm Sun LLC. The 25-year agreement will have a solar development firm leasing land over a capped landfill from the waste district and financing a 5-megawatt solar project, which, by the way, I am told is 4 megawatts.
Well, that's still up in the air.
Yeah.
I got that yesterday from the horse's mouth. It has not totally been decided yet.
Well, I'm glad you did, because I've been hearing this as 5 megawatts,
Yeah, I've heard the same thing.
4 megawatts,
Four,
and
but,
nobody seems to know. But it is interesting that it is right here in River City.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Bob Spencer is the director of the Waste Management District. And
Yep.
they have invited him to come on the show.
Oh.
He's a fan of the show. So.
Is he really?
Yeah,
Well, I would be very pleased.
Yeah, I think
I'm glad you
he'd be
did
a
that.
good guy.
Yeah, yeah. There are a lot of people who are very interesting, and there aren't very many, I would say. I don't think so. But there are a few. Okay.
There's
Business.
also some biodigester activity down there that I'm not even aware of.
At the Wyndham,
Yeah.
well, they capture gases from the landfill.
They've been doing that for years.
Yeah.
They're about exhausted on it. But I think about 2 years ago, a guy was putting up some stuff there to raise algae and stuff.
That's right. That was
And he
the.
went bankrupt.
Yep.
But I think the stuff's still there.
Yeah. Some of it. A lot of that was auctioned off.
So it may very well resurrect itself. I'm not sure. Maybe Bob will tell us.
Maybe. Okay, Business Green tells us this. The UK's government wants to kickstart its nascent shale gas industry with a pointed reminder to planning authorities that ministers wish to see, ministers, that being the central government, wish to see fracking planning applications fast-tracked, stressing an urgent need, their words, not mine, for development. The guidance will give the energy minister more freedom to intervene in hearing appeals against planning decisions on shale gas projects.
I thought that guy on the right was Donald Trump, but he's not.
You mean it's a hat on his head, not a comb over. A hard hat. Yeah, well, what can I say? I really think somebody should put together a bunch of money and find a bunch of people who live in Pennsylvania or Oklahoma whose houses have been damaged by...
Because of fracking.
Yeah, because of fracking. Take them to the UK and use them to go around the country. And, you know, it's disturbing because the support for fracking in the UK is very small compared
Among
to
the population.
Among the population, compared to the support for wind and solar.
Yeah, so what does the government do?
Well, it supports big business. That's what it does.
Yeah. That's what's
Big
happening.
business first,
They're supporting
human beings.
shale and they're deprecating wind.
Yes.
Onshore wind.
Yeah.
Which is, well, it doesn't seem to make sense, but you just explained it.
Big business.
And big business.
There you go.
As they say down south, business.
Business?
Business, yeah.
Didn't know that one.
Yeah.
I know that if you're talking about grits,
Yeah.
it is a 2-syllable word.
Yeah, it is. Griots.
Griots.
Yeah, griots.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I was told that by my stepmother, who lives in Georgia.
I was down in North Carolina one time, and I don't know, I was just in a mischievous mood having breakfast, and I said, "You have any grits?" And they said, "Yeah." And they said, "Well, bring me one." And they did.
On a plate.
One grill on a plate, about 5 waitresses came out. I thought they were going to sing happy birthday.
Oh, man. Oh, well.
Moving right
Grits,
along.
by the way,
Yeah.
are more nutritious, I am told, than regular corn on the cob by a fair amount.
All right.
Which is kind of surprising because you take corn.
The shells, don't they?
You take the corn and you treat it with sodium hydroxide. Same stuff
Yeah,
I was
the same
using to
stuff
get
you
the
were
chlorine
working
out of
with.
the,
Why?
out of the air. And I always thought, that must wreck that corn. No, it liberates a whole bunch of nutrients that you otherwise would not get. So, okay. Anyway, let's keep going and escape that. Arkansas Online tells us that Entergy Arkansas, we just heard about them a few minutes ago.
It's Entergy Arkansas again.
Intends to pay a little bit more than 5 cents per kilowatt hour for electricity from a proposed solar farm. Entergy will buy power from NextEra, which plans to build an 81 megawatt solar energy farm on a 475 acre site about 7 miles southeast of Stuttgart, not Stuttgart because that's German, this is Stuttgart because it's American.
It's in Arkansas.
NextEra will spend more than $120 million to develop and build the solar farm, according to a spokesman for NextEra. That, by the way, is interesting to me because that means they're going to spend $120 million putting together a farm that is more than 80 megawatts. And that, in turn, means that they're spending about $1.66 per kilowatt per watt, which is a low price for solar.
So you're getting it cheap.
They're getting it cheap, that's right.
And apparently this nickel a kilowatt hour was leaked to the guy inadvertently.
Inadvertently?
That
Yes.
said it wasn't supposed to.
Yeah, well, people do that sometimes.
Well, so I think this really was a slip of the tongue.
Oh, I'm sure it was. And it was
the article, I think they slapped his
yeah,
wrist.
it was a slip of the tongue when the guy at the Nuclear Regulatory Commission told the conference call that the fuel they found over a mile from the Fukushima Daiichi plant could not possibly have come from a spent fuel pool because it had been too recently in a critical mass.
That's an interesting. I thought they told us that wasn't happening. So you're trying to say the Japanese government's a little bit dishonest at times?
No, I think the U.S. government and the Japanese government are a little bit dishonest at times, but that's a matter of record. It was in a conference call.
Well, let's finish on this one.
Oh, yes, let's get back to where we're supposed to be.
Nickel a kilowatt hour is wholesale.
Yes.
But the average retail in the United States is 12 cents.
Right.
So there's plenty of room for profit at it.
There absolutely is. And the people at NextEra obviously think that they're going to make a profit on it too. So our next item comes from Renews, and this is Tuesday, August 11th. Abengoa, I don't know how to pronounce that one at all.
That's an American firm.
Is it?
Yeah.
Abengoa and Toshiba Corporation have been picked to build the Tees Renewable Energy Plant, a 299 megawatt CHP project that is combined heat and power.
Yeah,
CHP.
now that's interesting in itself. Yep. Combined heat and power, a great idea.
Yeah, it is.
No waste heat, you're using it.
Right, to be sited at Teesside, UK. The project will have a capacity of 299 megawatts, which we've already said, from electricity and steam, to be used in combustion and exported to nearby industrial facilities and consumers. The engineering, design, and construction contract is worth more than 600 million euros.
This picture here is not in England.
Yes.
In Indiana, and it is Abengoa's renewable energy plant.
Okay.
And it's biogas.
That presumably is very similar to the one that we're talking about. In order really to get effective use of the heat from a plant like that in a combined heat and power system, it's got to be near somebody who wants the heat.
Well, yeah, that makes sense. And I don't think this one is.
Yeah.
But the one in the Teesside is.
Yeah. I was told by an engineer at Vermont Yankee, a very nice guy, that Vermont Yankee produced enough waste heat to heat every house in Vermont.
Every house in Vermont?
Every house in Vermont.
And they were just spewing it into the atmosphere?
And the river.
And the river.
Yeah.
Wow.
Heating up, this is gratuitously heating up the atmosphere in a time of climate change, and the river. So...
There's got to be a better way.
There's got to be a better way than that. And one of the points that he was making was we could have heated every house in Brattleboro and Greenfield if people would be willing to run the pipes to them. But the problem was he thought that nobody would want water that came from a nuclear power plant to heat their houses.
That's probably true.
Yeah, it is.
Probably.
And I've been anti-nuclear for a long time, and I can tell you that I wouldn't worry about water coming from a nuclear power plant, at least not under those circumstances. Although I might worry about Entergy because they never tell you where the pipes run. For those of you who don't know,
I would also expect that the water that they would be circulating wasn't the exact same water they used to cool
No,
the plant. It would have
no,
gone through a heat
no,
exchange.
it goes through a heat exchanger, and that means that this water has not been exposed to the reactor
Yeah,
at
bingo.
all. From Energy Digital. Could the United States be on the verge of a wind energy renaissance? I doubt it, because we didn't have we didn't have the naissance to begin with. It's quite possible now more than ever before, according to a new report produced by the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory and funded by the U.S. DOE's Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy. The price of wind energy in the United States is at an all-time low. Well, it's been at an all-time low ever since it hit its all-time low over a year ago. It just keeps kind of
Keeps getting
gradually
a little bit lower, doesn't it?
going down.
We're talking about a nickel a kilowatt hour. They're
Yep.
talking about 2.5 cents.
That's right. And as a matter of fact, it's been a year since I read a thing saying that the lowest prices for wind energy have been in the neighborhood of 1.5 cents.
Have they really?
Yeah, and the 2.5 cents is average. That's the average price. Now, how in the world can natural gas, coal, you name it, how can they compete with that? They can't.
They can't. That's
And
the
if you
bottom line
if you
there.
took the incentives that they give the wind industry away, and said, okay, now you're going to have to make it on your own, they would be at that rate selling their power for 4.8 cents per kilowatt hour, and coal and natural gas and nuclear would not be able to touch that price. And just for the sake of argument, if we're going to take the incentives away from renewable power, why don't we take them away from coal and gas and nuclear?
Well, I can't disagree. I can't disagree.
Yeah.
The incentives for the fossils have long since outlived their usefulness. It's
Boy,
a
have they
gift
ever.
now.
Yeah, it's a gift. Okay, well, no, it's not really a gift. It's a payback for support that they give to the politicians that they
Okay.
corrupt. Okay.
I'm not going to argue that one either.
From CNN, we got this on Tuesday. The price of gasoline in some parts of the U.S. could go below $2 a gallon by fall, according to some analysts. The price of crude oil is being pushed lower by concerns about a slowdown in the Chinese economic growth, strong oil output in North America and the Middle East, as well as a tentative nuclear deal with Iran, which could bring more of that country's oil into the market.
So strange things are happening in the oil market too, aren't
Well,
they?
I always thought the price of oil, as we went past peak oil, the price of oil would just go up and up and up and up and up and up and up.
That seems logical.
It does, but what
Now
has
it's
been
got
happening is
competition.
it's got competition, it's got a dwindling marketplace, and the marketplace for oil is already dwindling. So you've got, an increase in output. Why do they have an increase in output? Because they're willing to spend more money putting together the things that are needed to get the increase in output to a very large extent. But in addition to that, you've got dwindling demand in the face of dwindling supply. It's kind of hard to balance intellectually whether the supply side or the demand side is more important than that. Right now,
And then you got people like the Saudis that are trying to move all that,
Absolutely.
that oil while they
Yeah.
still can.
Absolutely. Okay, Wednesday, August 12th. And this comes from an organization with the name Tree Hugger. Do you suppose that has some deep inner meaning, Tom? Wind power keeps chugging along with prices falling all the time, though not as dramatically as solar, and installed capacity is going up. Every new turbine that goes up will keep producing clean power for decades to come at very little cost, basic maintenance, no fuel costs, unlike fossil fuel power plants. The U.S. added 4.8 gigawatts of wind power in 2014, 24% of our new capacity, and by the way, so far this year, it is upwards of 40% of new
That's
capacity.
interesting. Got some interesting pictures here.
Yeah, look at that guy.
There's a guy
There's a
sitting,
guy.
sitting out there
That's
on
not
a turbine blade.
Yeah, that's not a housefly, ladies and gentlemen. That is a guy.
Yep, I got another one coming right up.
Oh,
Another
let's look.
guy on another turbine.
Oh my gosh! It makes me feel kind of queasy just to look at these things. I've always had a problem with heights. Somebody said to me,
probably Mohawks.
Yeah, they might be.
Yeah.
Somebody told me when I was a little kid, if you're afraid of heights, climb ladders a lot. You'll get over it. Yeah. And I went into the Alps and I climbed a mountain. And, you know, there's kind of a path going all the way to the top. It sounds so dramatic to say that you climbed a mountain in the Alps. But in fact, it was, you know, and the way up, I couldn't see anything because everything was really foggy. But I got up there, and there was a restaurant on top. And on the way down, I realized I was late getting back to where I wanted to be, and I started running on this path. Yeah. And then as I was running down the path, I happened to notice that in the side of the mountain, there was a white thing, a square white thing, and I stopped and I looked and I read in English, "From this point, Dexter Smith of Minneapolis, Minnesota, fell 387 feet to his death." And
wow.
I looked at little cows, little people, little houses, down at the bottom of a cliff. Wow. No, thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
From the same article, there's a picture of the cumulative installed wind capacity.
Yep.
From 1997 to 2014.
Yep.
That looks almost, well, I wouldn't say almost, looks exponential to me.
Well, it is actually. If you look at it, it's
at a very
rough.
Rapid rate.
Yeah, it is. It's roughly exponential because it you know, there's differences from year to year, but on worldwide, it's pretty close to exponential. That red graph, I think, is the
red graph we're talking about.
Worldwide, yeah.
And this table here shows that the United States is second here after China.
Yep.
We're about half as much as China, but
yeah, the United States is second to China in a lot of things right now.
Yeah, yeah.
And why is that happening? Because, in my opinion, there are people and organizations in this country which want to pay politicians to keep us in 19th century technology.
Well, something like that. Yeah, I'm not going to disagree. Essentially, I think you're right.
Yeah.
Interesting thing also on this, that after Germany, fourth on this list is India.
Yes.
And this is wind.
Yes.
We also have seen a lot of solar going on in India.
A lot of solar.
I would predict that toward the balance of this century, India is going to be a world power. Well,
could I ask you for something?
You can. I'm not sure you're going to get it.
Would you show me your crystal ball? I think that's a
secondhand in a pawn shop.
Did you?
Yeah, yeah.
I should look at pawn shops more. The Indians are in fact pursuing a kind of a strange path. They're increasing the amount of coal they use. They're decreasing their coal imports. They're increasing coal by opening new mines, and they've got a scheduled amount of solar power going in that is just astonishing.
Yeah,
it's
and
so
it's
big.
going in rural areas.
In rural areas.
They really
they need the electricity in rural areas,
absolutely.
and it's cheaper to put in solar than it is to put in transmission lines.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So we have an item here from the Business Spectator. China, oh, I love this one. China is now adding one idle coal power plant per week. State-owned power companies have continued adding new coal-fired power plants to the grid at a feverish pace. And in the first half of 2015, 23.4 gigawatts of thermal power plants were brought online. But at the same time, thermal power generation dropped 3.2%, and their capacity utilization fell to just below 50%.
So the less than half time these things are running.
Yeah. What can you say? You know, I mean, they're being outperformed by the wind turbines.
Well, they do some stuff that sometimes looks kind of weird.
Yes.
About 10 years ago, they were building cities everywhere that there wasn't people.
Yes.
And the cities were empty.
Yes.
And they were beautiful cities. Well, now they're moving populations from the east, where there's a lot of industry, to these cities.
Yep.
Now, did they plan this all along, or are they taking advantage of a mistake? I don't know.
You got me. You know,
I don't know, but
I will tell you, I think the Chinese plan things in a way which Americans find difficult to understand.
Well, by that.
In the old days, when somebody invented something impressive, they would keep that thing until the emperor died, and then they'd throw it away.
Oh, yeah.
And the reason was because they wanted somebody else to have the opportunity to invent it.
Well, that's neat.
Now, recently, you know, there's a kind of a famous photograph that shows Chiang Kai-shek and Mao Zedong in 1927, I think it was, toasting each other at a banquet. And the moment I saw that,
Chiang Kai-shek
and Mao Zedong, and I looked
bitter
at that,
enemies.
and I looked at that, and I thought, there's the future head at that point of communist China and the future head of nationalist China toasting each other. And then I looked into it a little bit, and I discovered that both of them had married women who were close relatives of Sun Yat-sen.
Oh.
And I thought to myself, these guys were in-laws, for crying out loud. I mean, they weren't brothers-in-law, but they were second cousins-in-law or something. And I thought, you know, they would have been perfectly capable of making a deal in which one of them says, okay, I'm going to get money from the Russians. You get money from the Americans. We'll see how much we can get. Let's have a big war, make lots of money.
Maybe that's exactly what happened.
It might be, who knows? So anyway, that was from the Business Spectator, although all the rest of that stuff that came along was from me, I have to admit. And our final item for today.
This is a good one, yeah.
Yeah. Clean Technica tells us Jiminy Peak Mountain Resort. Where is Jiminy Peak?
North Egremont. It's near North Adams.
Near North Adams, okay.
Yeah.
The largest ski resort in southern New England will soon be home to the largest community solar project in the northeastern United States, thanks to the construction by Nexamp of a 2.3 megawatt solar installation on 12 acres of the facility's property. This property will supply Jiminy Peak with enough energy to offset 90% of its annual needs.
There's a picture of Jiminy Creek up there now.
Yeah?
Jiminy Peak.
Jiminy
If you
Peak.
look at the upper the upper right corner of
Yep.
that, there's a windmill up there.
I can see it very plainly. All I've got to do is put my glasses on and get really close and
But,
use a magnifying glass.
These Jiminy Creek, I keep calling it. Jiminy Peak is looking to be basically almost off the grid.
Yes.
They're looking to cover all of their electricity requirements.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things that's happening with this solar project, that's going to be generating during the summer when they're really operating on a skeleton crew. So
Right.
they're doing some financial manipulation.
Yeah, you know what, though, some of these ski resorts have got other things going on in the summer.
Oh, sure.
And I forget,
Track lines and
they have these things where you can get
pole line, whatever they call it.
into a thing where you go in a line through the tops of the trees.
Yeah.
My goodness.
Yeah, I've done it.
Have you?
Yeah.
And you survived?
I survived. It's kind of fun. Yeah, I was down at Berkshire East,
Oh, okay.
and they have a windmill, and they were when I was down there, they were putting in a large solar farm, and they
Yep.
were saying, we're going to be able to produce virtually all the power we need.
Yeah, we did. We had an article about that in Green Energy Times. So, anyway, did you have a set of pictures you wanted to show us, Tom?
Well, I got some pictures, I hope, and they're on my thumb drive, so let's see if I can't pull them up.
Okay.
I'm going to have to get this guy out of here.
Get
I'm
which
using-
guy out of
using
where?
the wrong
Okay.
mouse.
Using the wrong mouse. Okay.
We get this guy out of here.
Uh-oh.
Apple software update, I'm going to quit that.
Okay, good idea.
Yeah, and I'll try and see if I can't get into my thumb drive here.
Okay.
Devices with removable whatevers. Come on, you're supposed to get up. Here we go. And we got third week, Energy Week. And, well, here's a good one, the Airbus.
All right.
The
Let's look at the
E-plane.
Airbus.
Electric plane.
Electric plane.
This is the one where they announced they were going to
Fly across the English Channel. This is
Some
a
guy
really
did it the night before.
This is a really interesting thing because
Come on, you're supposed
at the
to
very
talk here.
same time that Solar Impulse was flying around the world. Well, I guess we're going to have to do something else then.
Well, I'll try and open it.
I'll have to tell Roland that we had a Empty
I've got
time.
it.
Okay.
It can't be previewed, but it can be opened.
Okay.
Microsoft isn't your default program for viewing and editing documents.
Okay.
No, that's cool.
Okay. There we go.
Yeah, here we go.
What is it that we're looking at here?
Well, I'm going to try and make it a little bit bigger. That was too much bigger. Okay.
Oh, it's an airplane on a runway.
This is an electric plane,
Yeah.
and this is the one that was built by Airbus. It's an E-fan.
Right.
And this was the one that they talked about.
Yeah.
And here it is up in the air.
Look at that.
Same plane.
You know, I'll bet that thing's noisy.
I don't think it is. It's
Well,
electric.
the blades of the propeller blades make noise.
You'll hear a whir, but you're not going to hear the typical airplane noise, I don't think. And it's flying across the channel now. And here we go.
Is this the one where they got halfway, decided they couldn't make it, and turned around and went back?
No, this guy made it. This
Yeah.
guy made it.
Yeah.
And here he's about to land. He's coming down.
And here are the customs inspectors gathering around.
He's just about to land right now. He's just heading down into the runway.
Yep.
And here he goes. Touchdown.
Touchdown. There you go.
And
And the thing that I find interesting about
he
this.
is now being heralded by the crowd.
Yep. The thing that I find interesting about this is that this happened. The first electric plane to cross the English Channel crossed the English Channel at exactly the same time in history when the first electric plane was attempting to fly around the world.
Yes, yeah.
That is
was happening too.
strange. That's just
That was
bizarre.
And this is an update to this show. We're hearing that under cover of darkness last night. Hughes de Waal decided to cross the English Channel in his tiny Cree electric plane.
Yep.
As we originally reported yesterday, another electric plane, the Pipistrel Alpha Electro, should have crossed the channel as well, but the flight was reportedly blocked due to a dispute between the plane maker and Siemens, who made the electric motor.
This all sounds so much like stuff that was going on in the time before Lindbergh crossed the Atlantic Ocean.
And here is the Cree.
Yeah, yeah.
This is the interloper here.
The
Interesting
interloper.
motor. It's a dual motor there, if you can see it. It's counter-rotating props front and
Right,
back.
right.
Interesting motor.
And
it's a tiny plane.
Siemens made the motors here.
No, that's the third plane.
Oh, that's the other one. But even so, you
Here
know
we go, the original one. This is
that's
just
the first plane to cross the English Channel
in 1909.
in 1909.
Yeah, it wasn't electric.
It wasn't electric. You never can tell. It might have been a steam locomotive in those days. I bet somebody did make a plane with a steam locomotive.
Say what?
I wouldn't be surprised if somebody made a plane that ran on a steam engine.
Kind of heavy.
Yeah, but you know, you never can tell what people are going to do. Well, the
I'd be
engines.
surprised somebody didn't try it.
Yeah, the engines that they used in the Stanley steamer weren't very big.
They weren't, huh?
No, I had a friend who owned one and drove it. He said the engine was about the size of a not the engine, the boiler was about the size of a grapefruit can.
I'll be darned. I wouldn't have thought it was so small.
Well, it was a flash boiler. I think we're getting toward the end of our time here, and so we're going to have to say goodbye to everybody.
I think so.
But we can point to the plane and say that's the future, or that's the
Well,
past.
that's the past.
Yeah.
The plane that's
Okay.
on the screen here is the original one.
And so we will suggest that you all have a happy week and come back in the future.
We may even be here.
We may even be here. Good night.
Good night.
It makes the wind blow strong as it will. I wonder how gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still.